Simon Thomas is one of the rare breed of people who've been both an MP, an Assembly member and a senior special advisor working at the heart of the Welsh Government. So he brings a rich perspective to this debate and now is Plaid Cymru's education spokesperson, and I invite Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. All those things, but also bold. Thank you for the opportunity to take part in this very timely debate, and thank you, IWA and Aberystwyth University, for ensuring that it takes place. Now, it's very timely because only today we had the Institute for Fiscal Studies and the Sutton Trust study showing that the majority of undergraduates now at university will still be paying off their student loans well into their 40s and even 50s, with 3/4 of them being unable to clear their debt even after 30 years. This study also confirmed the size of student debt, now averaging at £44,000 of debts. That's about £2,500 per annum of debt servicing, which graduates will have to find in a currently depressed job market for everyone. There is, of course, perhaps a perverse incentive into not improving your job prospects to the degree by which you will start to repay quite heavily. Now, this study only adds to the Westminster Government's own most recent assessment that the tuition fee loan system is fast approaching the point at which the policy of tripling tuition fees to £9,000 will bring no return whatsoever to the Treasury. The write-off figure is rapidly approaching the 46.8% mark, estimated by economists to be the threshold at which the government will actually start to lose money it would have saved by keeping the old tuition fee system. The official forecast, confirmed by David Willits, is now at 45% of the £10 billion of student loans made available each year. In 2010, before the introduction of the tripling of fees, the estimate was 28%. This means that currently the government expects £90 billion of an overall sum of £200 billion of student loans to remain unpaid by 2042. In this crazy, distorted view of the true value of higher education, the proposal to lift the current cap on tuition fees would be, in the words of David Bowie, like putting out fire with gasoline. Let me state clearly that I and Plaid Cymru still adhere to the principle of free tuition at undergraduate level. We believe that this can and should be an investment for all of us for the future of the nation. I think I'm correct in saying that the NUS is also now considering that the introduction of tuition fees has been a failed experiment. The Liberal Democrats, who opposed tuition fees in principle in the 2004, at the time that the legislation went through Parliament, and indeed continued to oppose it until the time that over half their MPs became coalition government ministers, have now abandoned any pretence here in Wales of supporting free tuition. To me, this is another example of what David Marquand called recently in the New Statesman, whoring after the false gods of Orange Book market fundamentalism. To be fair, it's not just the Liberal Democrats that do that. The HE sector as a whole and many elements in other parties have also worshipped at the same altar. This pattern of vacillation by various groups and parties shows why it is vital to have a cool, long, hard look at funding for higher education. I called for such a cross-party examination last summer, so I was pleased when the Diamond Review was established. I've had to fight to ensure it did break over the period of the next Assembly elections, so that all political parties would have to state their principles and views to the electorate, and so the Welsh Government could not hide behind yet another review and refuse to set out its stall. Having secured that agreement, Plaid Cymru will now work with the Diamond Review and all other parties to try and agree a way forward. Now, I do recognise that in the current constitutional arrangements and in the cross-border flow of students, Wales cannot have a tuition fee-free system. We have, in our own consultation on this, estimated that the cost would be an extra £336 million per annum. And quite frankly, Wales can't afford that. So the practical question is how we use the resources we have to both cushion the impact of tuition fees for students as a whole, how any system promotes social justice and equal access, how we ensure adequate funding for HE institutions in Wales, including for high-cost courses and research, and how we build in values and principles of public investment and public money. It's curious to me that when this was introduced, and I was a Member of Parliament, most Vice-Chancellors in Wales at the time opposed the introduction of tuition fees. I know that's not the case now, but it was the case 10 years ago. And Vice-Chancellors have certainly not complained less to me over those 10 years about the access to funding that they have. Indeed, they claim that they have less funding than they had then. So in doing this, I think we have to be clear about some things. Firstly, Student loans are in no way a kind of graduation tax. Though they are not paid up front, and though they are linked to income thresholds, they remain an individual debt. There is no sense of sharing and pooling resources that you get in a genuine taxation system. You are buying a pig in a poke if you swallow the line that it's just a kind of graduation tax. The same pig in a poke that a change in pension annuities is trying to sell. Higher education institutions are independent, but not private, with one or two exceptions, I know. For a nation to treat higher education institutions as private entities entitled to trade in students and the money they represent does represent a whoring of principles and is fundamentally dishonest. Higher education institutions feed on a huge public investment in our education system, as indeed Nick Barr has just pointed out, and our young people. They owe a moral duty to the nation to respect that, and it is appropriate that governments back up that moral duty with legal obligations. The target of 50% of young people to go to universities, which drove tuition fees policy in the first place, was and is a cul-de-sac. We should instead look at how we achieve graduate-level skills for as many young people as possible, which includes through vocational and apprenticeship training. Any thinking of tuition fees and HE funding post-cap has to take higher-level vocational qualifications and the co-funding model being tested in that arena into account. Now, I was an MP at the time that this was introduced and sat indeed on the committee that considered the higher education bill at the time. And that was exactly 10 years ago, January 2004. At the time, I stated several things. I'll give you some of those quotes. The cap will not keep tuition fees down, I said. It will not work. And capping variable fees is rather like trying to be a little bit pregnant. It will grow out of all proportion and all size. The principle has been yielded, and the principle will out. In 15 years of politics, I haven't got everything right. This one I did.